Captain's log, stardate 76212.6. I can't tell you how excited I was this week that the Cerritos crew got a chance to visit Station Deep Space Nine. Growing up, Deep Space Nine was one of my favorite Trek shows, second only to The Next Generation. So I'm extremely excited to talk to Captain Shoff and get his take on this tacky Cardassian fascist eyesore. Welcome to TREKnological, a Star Trek shakedown, a short form podcast hosted by two hardworking dads who love to talk Trek. I am Captain Vactor. I'm here with me each and every week, hopefully, is in my co-captain's chair on the bridge of the USS TREKnological, Captain Shoff. How are you doing today, Captain Shoff?
Woo! I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. I'm glad to be talking about Star Trek today. I've been looking forward to this all week. So thrilled to be here. Thank you, Captain Vactor.
I can't wait as well. But if you're new to our show, each week we travel to a new planet to seek out new Trek news, as well as boldly going through our thoughts of each episode of whatever the current Star Trek show that's playing. Right now, we're doing Star Trek Lower Decks. So if you'd like to follow along, please feel free to do so. Quick shout out to John Darnowski, who sent us this awesome voicemail using the anchor link in our show notes. So let's hear right now what John had to say. All right. Thank you very much, John. Now, this is a very well-timed voicemail because Captain Shoff has some discouraging words to say about Star Trek Prodigy. So I'm glad John is here to bring us around, turn the ship around and put us back on course, because he said that Prodigy is a great show, Shoff.
He did, yeah. And you know what? I gotta say, his enthusiasm over it is making me want to watch it. Making me want to binge these first 10 episodes before the new, not the new season, sorry, the second half of the first season kicks back off. And it's going to kick off the same day as the Lower Decks season finale. So that episode for us, I don't know exactly what mission number it'll be for us on our episode count, but when that one debuts, it's going to be a double header, because we're going to have to, based on what John's recommendation, and we take these recommendations not lightly. We take them heavily. I don't know what the right word to say is here, but yeah, we really appreciate that feedback, and just what you said, prove us wrong. I love that. I love the engagement. Please continue to do that. We appreciate those recommendations, and I think Vactor, I think we're going to have to talk and watch Prodigy.
Ooh-wee. Now, just for the listeners at home, I've actually seen the first 2 episodes of Prodigy, and I was planning on continuing it solo because Shoff was not interested at first. But now, thanks to, we'll call him Cadet John. Thank you very much, Ensign, for this wonderful recommendation of Star Trek Prodigy, because I wanted to get Shoff on board with this. So I'm glad that we will be covering Star Trek Prodigy. So thank you very much. And like we said, you can also leave us a voicemail in the Anchor app itself, or just even on our show notes. So if you're listening to the podcast, in the show notes, there's an Anchor link where you can leave a voicemail. And you saw how nice it sounded. You saw how high quality it was. You can do the exact same thing. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you may not hear that voicemail, but just be rest assured that the Anchor link is all you need. And it's great for leaving voicemail, contacting us, getting a hold of us, and kind of interacting with us. And that's what we encourage, because so far, the Trek community has been the most welcoming community. I do a number of podcasts, and the different communities that I'm involved in, none are as engaging as Star Trek. And you saw that last week with Captain Rick, who we had reached out to just by seeing his TikTok. And I think Captain Schaff has been doing a great job on our TikTok. If you want to head over there and get in on all the fun, I'm also trying to post Schaff's shorts. Hey, Schaff's shorts, that's a new one on
not not
YouTube.
not my actual shorts. I'm wearing pants right now, but I'm trying to post his undershorts.
On YouTube, on Instagram, and then on TikTok. So we're trying to be in all the short form places that we can. So definitely check us out because Schaff is the mastermind behind all of the short content. So kudos to Schaff, and you will enjoy it.
I am a shouty. I am a
Yeah.
shouty.
Speaking of Schaff, Schaff, let's set a course for the nearest planet, maximum warp.
Eyesore, course laid in.
It's warp time. All right, Captain Schaff, meet me in the transporter room where we'll beam down to the planet's surface to search for some Trek news.
Eyesore, on my way.
To the beam down. All right, Schaff, we're here. Let's scan the planet's surface for any sign of Trek news.
Oh, I found some Trek news, Captain Vactor.
Excellent, Captain Schaff. You know, we greatly appreciate your efforts. I don't say this enough, but we really appreciate you finding all these great news stories and putting them in our show notes for all of our listeners to check out. This week in particular, there's some great stuff, including a little replicator where you can make your own Lower Decks cartoon of yourself, which is great. I got a chance to play around with that, Schaff, and let's say the results were interesting. I think I'm looking forward to see Schaff's creation, and maybe we'll post that on the TikTok or someplace.
Real quick, I wanted to mention I really liked how it was fairly inclusive. I know there wasn't a whole lot of like facial hair choices and things like that, but they definitely had a lot of like skin color choices, which is awesome. They had, varying genders, varying bodies and shapes and sizes. And then as well, they had augmented arms and legs. So
Yes.
I thought about like any of disabled Trekkies out there that have, handicaps in some way, shape, or form, they can feel represented as well. So I thought that was really, really cool. And I had fun making it. I think we definitely need to post our pictures in various forms of content. So look out for our Lower Deck selves. We were talking about this just the other day. We were saying let's hire a Fiverr person to make our Lower Deck selves, and then Star Trek's like, tell you what, you don't need to spend money; it's free.
And that website is StarTrek.com/replicate yourself, which we will feature in our show notes. So thank you very much, Schaff, for including all those great stories this week.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into our episode recap. Now, this episode is season 3, episode 6, which debuted Thursday, September 29th, 2022, written by Grace Para Janney, and directed by Phil Mark Sagadraka. I'm going to say it like that.
I think you said it better than the last time I tried to say it. I butchered it. And then I was listening back to the podcast. I had like spent an unnecessarily long amount of time, like kind of making fun of the first name and how it's spelled. And I was listening back on a car ride somewhere, and I was like, man, I wasn't very nice to this guy. So I want to issue a formal apology. Your name can be whatever your name wants to be, and I'm not going to make fun of it. So Phil, if your name is spelled like the verb instead of the name, that's fine. That's fine. It's not your fault. It's your parents' fault, and I'm not mad at them either. So yeah. But anyways, I wanted to throw that out there. This episode was called "Hear All, Trust Nothing."
Yes,
Hear All, Trust Nothing.
And if you have not seen Hear All, Trust Nothing, I want to let everybody know this is going to be a spoiler-filled discussion. So if you haven't seen it, go watch the episode on Paramount Plus, come back to us, and join in on all the fun. Now, synopsis for this episode: the Cerritos crew unexpectedly spends a day on Deep Space Nine. What? Now, this was actually hinted by Boimler's Twitter account. And I had sent you that tweet that he put out where he was like, there's something big is coming. Like this episode is going to be special.
Yeah.
We didn't know what that meant, but as Trekkies, as Trek fans, this was a very special episode. Not just a tease. This was a full-on Deep Space Nine episode, and I gotta say, right off the bat, Shaw, I love this episode. This might be my favorite episode, not only of the season. I'm pulling a Shaw, not only
Oh,
of a season, but of the series.
what?
I love this episode, and I said it in my captain's log. Deep Space Nine was one of my most formative Trek experiences. I remember Next Generation. I loved right off the bat. Every other series, I kind of had to get slowly introduced to it. Voyager was the same way, where I caught reruns and I wasn't even intently watching. I have this memory of I was doing a summer job and it was some type of paperwork filing or something, stapling stuff, but I was able to watch TV. And so I would play Deep Space Nine, was
Uh-huh.
I guess that was just on at the time. And I would just watch rerun. And it got to the point where I wasn't doing my work anymore. I'm sitting there watching the episode of Deep Space Nine. So that was a way that I got kind of engrossed, and it really made me a fan of Deep Space Nine, where I wasn't intent on doing it like I was with Next Generation. But
Sure.
both Deep Space Nine and Voyager, I had that same situation.
Favorite character on Deep Space Nine?
Well, as I believe he is one of my favorite captains, and Shoff got me his character in the background. It's got to be Cisco, but I
Ooh.
love Quark. That was from day one. I've always loved Quark, so seeing him in this episode was a real treat for me.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I really like all the characters. Like, there's none. I was recently introducing my wife to these Deep Space Nine. She had never seen him before, and watching that first episode and you're being introduced to all these characters, and I was like, oh, this guy's gonna do this, he's gonna do this later, she's gonna do this later. So all these memories of what's gonna happen flooded my mind. But my wife, I was like, just wait, you're gonna like all these guys.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Um Deep Space Nine was a show that I sat on. Like, so when it first came out, I wasn't into it, and I had kind of a I had probably a similar opinion to a lot of people who don't give it a chance. In that, a lot of times you want the show because you're used to Star Trek being a show that takes place on a ship, and the ship
Yes.
moves and the ship travels, and that's how it finds its new life, new civilizations, seeking out strange new worlds, right? But when you've got a space station as the focal point of a show, a space station's not going anywhere. And so to me, that concept for a show felt super stagnant. And so I really didn't give it a chance when it was first on TV. But I came back to it much later, after it was well off the air.
Mm.
And I was like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give, because I'm a Trekkie and I consider myself a true Trekkie. Like, I want to give it a chance. Just like we're going to give Prodigy a chance. I wanted to give Deep Space Nine a chance. And I'm so glad I did, because Deep Space Nine has turned into absolutely one of my most favorite shows. I think it had the best character development of any Star Trek show to this day. And that's probably because it focused on a static location. Well, for the most part. Obviously, they would go some places every now and again, but the focus was more about the characters and the relationships and this brooding war conflict. And no other show had done that. It was incredible. A great show. Great show. So,
Excellent.
so yeah, Deep Space Nine is definitely one I hold near and dear.
Excellent. So what did you think overall of this episode, Shaw?
I hated it. No, I'm just kidding. No, I loved it. I loved it. I feel like episode 5, now episode 6, we're on this upward swing. Like, they're just like hitting on all cylinders. It makes me really excited for what 7, 8, 9, 10 are going to look like, because they've just been, these last couple episodes have been really strong and fixed a lot of what I thought was sort of the problem of this
Mm,
season, which was just sort of like waiting around and not
right.
really focusing on the plot lines that you set forth for your characters, not really finding a through line for that.
Right.
But this episode did a lot to further the bold Boimler. It did a lot to give us more about Tendy's backstory. It gave us more about Mariner. And I would say, in this sense, because Rutherford was such a important part of the last episode, he had a little bit more of a backseat. He was just sort of like a companion on the
Right.
ride, but you still got to experience the what I love about Lower Decks is a lot of times it's like Star Trek. It's like the characters on the show are fans of Star Trek. Like they're fans of Starfleet. And
Yes.
so like Rutherford is very much a Trekkie. And the way he runs around the promenade, and like he wants to dangle his feet
That
on the
was
promenade,
that
just
moment
like,
was perfect.
yeah, just like Jake and was it not what was his friend's name? Jake and
Was it
Nog?
Nog? Yeah, I think it was Nog.
Okay. Yeah. Like that was so fun to me. I just, there's so much to enjoy. So much to enjoy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I really love this episode, like I said. But basically, we have two different storylines going on. We follow Mariner and was it Jenny or Jennifer?
Well, she's both Jennifer
Yeah,
to Mariner, but Jenny to her friends, which was a surprise to
yes,
Mariner.
voiced by Lauren Lapkus, who one of my favorite voice actresses. But her storyline with Mariner going off and kind of having that adventure, and then there's the Tendi Rutherford and another Orion that we're meeting, voiced by Adam Pally, who another one of my favorite guys. So I was hearing voices left and right
Real
on this
quick,
episode.
real quick. I wrote down in my notes, and I did not check this, so I didn't know what the voice cast was.
Mhm.
But I got half of it right because
Oh,
as I was listening to this, Orion, I think his name is Mesk
yes.
in this
That's
episode.
right. Yes.
Um, I was like, this guy sounds just like Adam Pally. He's got the same like inflection where it's like really casual, and he just rambles and rambles, but he's funny, but he's also annoying. Like Adam Pally is the perfect amount of funny and annoying all at the same time. And I was like, this has got to be Adam Pally. And sure enough, it was. But what I got wrong was the Karima guy. I think his name is Kors. I wrote it down. Hold on, let's see here. He was Korzak. Korzak. I thought
Oh,
that was
okay.
Kelsey Grammer. I was sure that
Oh,
was Kelsey Grammer, but actually, I think he was playing double duty. It was the same guy who voices Shax,
yes.
Fred.
Which Tedeschiore, and
Thank you. Yeah.
he's notable because he has played the Hulk in Marvel animated shows.
Oh,
So that's how
okay.
I always recognize his voice, just because of the Hulk. So yeah, I spotted that he was doing double duty, and this show does that a lot. You'll hear he'll play a background character, or Nolan North will play multiple characters, but that's typical of any animated show. But yeah, that was one that I picked out, and we had our two special voice actors, the Deep Space Nine originals, Armin Shimmerman, who played Quark, and then
Yep.
Nana Visitor playing Kira. And both of them, like it was a cherry on the sundae. I was hoping to catch Cisco or somebody, but it was a great honor and great pleasure to hear both of those actors still
It
sounding
really
good.
was. And I have to say, at first I wasn't 100% convinced that it was Armin Shimmerman back as
Oh,
Quark.
mhm.
It didn't, to me, it didn't sound super Quark like. It almost sounded like he had been away from the role long enough to that he wasn't really grabbing it. But by the end of the episode, I felt like he was dialed in. Um, Kira Nerys Nana Visitor, like she was awesome, and she had the same spunk of her character from the show.
Yeah.
A quick bit of canon connections. There's a link, I'll put it in the show notes, but there was a great article on TREKcore.com,
Mm, mhm.
and they were going into some of the details of the episode. And one thing to kind of
Yes.
take note of, this visit to Starbase, or to Deep Space Nine, it takes place in 2381, which is half a decade after the events of What You Leave Behind, which was the finale of Deep Space Nine, set in 2375. So it's been 5 years since Cisco decided to go and hang out with the prophets, and Colonel Kira took over Deep Space Nine. So there's that moment where she's looking off into space and looking at the wormhole, and you just know she's thinking about Cisco.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
cool.
and actually that reminds me, we forgot to mention the opening of this episode. might be my favorite
Yes.
opening of all time, where we got to hear the DS9 theme music. One of your favorite quotes of this episode, you had wrote it down in the show notes. Just keep circling. Just
Just
keep
keep sir.
going.
That was executed absolutely perfectly. The
And
the the jump
it's one of
cuts,
those
yeah, it was so great.
deep Easter eggs for Trek fans. Like if you know Deep Space Nine, like that is the opening of the show. And if you're just watching Lower Decks and you didn't have any knowledge of that, it doesn't hit you the same way. But as we say on every episode, the Trek Easter eggs on Lower Decks are just fantastic. That you see things in the background, and they have so much attention to to detail. And that Trek Core article that you pointed out has a lot of Easter eggs that they spot out and call
Yeah.
out. So I thought all of that stuff was great. And real quick, I wanted to say this, Shoff. So the opening also has Admiral Bien Amigo, um, and he is voiced by Carlos Al- Alazraki. I may have mispronounced that, but
Okay.
he is the father of Riley Alazraki, who is the voice of Rock Talk on Prodigy. So when we get to Prodigy, you'll see that character.
Oh.
She's one of the main characters of the show, but that's his daughter. So there's kind of a dad connection between them. But he is also notable. Here's another thing. He is notable because he's Deputy James Garcia on Reno 911. If anybody is a fan of Reno 911, he's a accomplished voice actor. He played the original voice of Spyro the Dragon, the
Wow.
Taco Bell Chihuahua, Rocco and Spunky on Rocco's Modern Life. So this guy is like voice acting royalty. And I got to give another quick shout out because he attended California State Sacramento in 1982. I was born in 1982 and I attended California State Sacramento in the year 2000. So some connections between me and Carlos
Stalker.
Alazraki.
Stalker.
So I thought that was cool. But yeah, he's a great voice actor and he did great on that. And that's where I got the Cerritos from.
Cerritos. Yo quiero Mexican pizza.
Yeah. Yes, yes. My favorite Taco Bell item.
So, this episode taking place on Deep Space Nine and having a gift shop, and Quark was a factor into it. So, tell me if you've ever been here, but in Vegas, I don't think they still
Yes.
have this, but in
Mm-mm.
Vegas, when I was a kid, they had Star Trek: The Experience,
Yes, I have
and it
been
was
there.
at the Las Vegas Hilton,
Mhm.
and it was a huge thing. So it was partially a museum of sorts. So they had lots of original props and costumes, and then they also had replica stuff. They had a massive Enterprise hanging from the ceiling. It was just a gorgeous thing, and it was all like decked out to look like you were on the promenade of Deep Space Nine. And
Yes.
then you would go, once you got through the museum part of it, you would go on what was like the experience. And it was like you going aboard the Enterprise, the D, and you got to go on the bridge and you got to like transport. And there was, I want to say the Borg were involved. It's been a long time, so I don't remember it very well, but I think there was like a Borg part of the experience that
Yes.
happened too. And then once you were done with the ride, quote unquote ride, you're not like sitting down riding anything, but it's like an experience. But once you finish that, you would leave that whole thing and you would basically be exposed to the promenade and Quark's bar. So you could have lunch or dinner or something there. And I loved that place so much. And I remember buying all sorts of stuff. I had a phaser remote control, like a Type 2 phaser remote control. I had Romulan ale I had picked up.
Oh, nice. Nice.
I remember eating food there, and they had like special forks. They only had like 3 prongs. It was like anything they could do to make it look futuristic and different.
Hmm.
Like it was something Cardassian or
Hmm.
something Bajoran, like something different. And they had Ferengis and Klingons walking around. And I remember ordering the cheeseburger. So like all their names of their foods was like in a Star Trek theme. So it was just hilarious to me. And when Quark was taking pictures with like the patrons there and they were going to the gift shop, I was getting massive Star Trek The Experience vibes. And it was just like so so special. It just
Yeah.
like hit me in my heart, my
Yeah.
heartstrings.
Well, that was what was good about this episode was not only was it a good episode, like the storyline was interesting and it was fun, it was funny, but it was also heartfelt and it made you nostalgic and it made you feel like you were connected again to that space station of Deep Space 9 and just the memories that it unlocked. So I really feel like this episode did double duty as far as being a great episode, but also being just a great trip down memory lane and unlocking all these things from our past. So that's a great story of the experience in Las Vegas, which I also attended. And I kind of wish they had something kind of like the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge that they have at Disneyland, something
Oh,
with Star Trek where we could go there, we could live out experiences. Um, that would be interesting, but I
hell
don't know
yeah.
what contract CBS has with anybody. So very good. And Shaw, there's some I just feel like laying out Easter eggs. We saw Morn,
Yeah.
which Schaff has made a TikTok with the corn. That's what I think about now. These TikToks that Schaff has been making now. That's all I'm when I see the actual thing he's referencing. His TikToks are what is in my mind. You even in our show notes in our Trek news this week, there's a clip of Captain Picard singing and dancing on the Enterprise as a tribute to Gene Roddenberry. All I
Yep.
could think about was Schaff's TikTok that he posted. So again, great work on the TikTok, Schaff. And everybody who's listening or watching this, check out our TikTok, which we linked in the show notes. Is just TREKnopod. But
Thank you.
Morn, the dance, the Kobayashi Maroon, which it doesn't matter. There's no right way to do it. Um, all of those things. You even saw the Rito shirt that Schaff is
Yeah.
wearing right now. We
Woo.
saw that in this episode. All of those things were great, and that scene with the Rito shirt with Mariner. Castro is telling a story, and Schaff, this made me laugh out loud. She goes, it was a dark and stormy 57162.3, a star date just like this. That made me laugh so hard. Just combining our Trek knowledge with our real world knowledge.
And then she was like,
Um,
I wasn't in the Enterprise. The Enterprise was in me all
all of
along.
those things. That was a great, and it wasn't even like a layered story, but it was just fun and funny of what Mariner was doing with her girlfriend Jennifer. So
Oh,
I really
yeah.
liked that storyline as well. Besides the Deep Space Nine storyline, like we said, but even back on the ship, just her Mariner's experience that she was having with Jennifer.
So, as it turns out, apparently, since I'm wearing this Rito shirt, that makes me in Betazoid casual. I'm just saying, according to the episode, Betazoid casual is wearing sweats, basically. Sweats and a
Nice.
Rito shirt, and you are Betazoid casual.
Excellent. Yeah, so like I said, this was just a great episode overall, Schaff. I don't know if you had any other specific things that you wanted to point out, but no notes from me. This was just another great episode of Lower Decks.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see more of the Mariner Jennifer relationship, which I think was severely lacking over the
Mm-hmm.
past
Mm-hmm.
5 episodes because they've sort of been hinting at it, but they really haven't shown much of them together to demonstrate what kind of development is happening. So I think that was really important. I think that Boimler had a little less to do, but also it was funny because it was all building up to the joke of the fact that money doesn't exist in Starfleet. So he's gambling with no intentions of doing
Yeah.
anything with it. And he turns out to be this amazing Dabo player. Just the presence of Dabo was fun to me. I liked seeing that. I think you can't have a Deep Space Nine based episode without some sort of Dabo stuff.
Yes.
But I wanted
Excellent.
to
I
see
loved it.
Lita? Leela?
Mm-hmm.
She's usually the Dabo girl, right? Like, I wanted to see her in this. And Chase Masterson, who played her in Deep Space Nine, she does a lot of stuff with
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek, and she's been at the conventions. Shout out to Star Trek guy. I saw a TikTok recently. He was interviewing her about things, so very cool. She was
Yeah.
at Star Trek Day. I remember seeing her on there too. But I think the coolest thing was we got more Tendi backstory. And there
Yeah.
really hasn't been much explored with her and the Orions, but we did get to learn more about just how proficient she is as a pirate if she really wanted to be.
Yes.
That
That
she was part
scene,
of.
that action sequence was fantastic. Of she did all that with a wine opener, which Adam Pally shouts out. That was a great sequence of her
Oh
just
yeah.
kicking everybody's butt, and like you said, her backstory of her family. That it actually made me go back and say, "Hey, I want to learn more about the Orions." And I was just doing some research and going a little bit further. But yeah, that I love that sequence of showing her proficiency, and she's always been kind of timid and kind, but just this is this. And she had a little bit of aggression in this episode when he Adam Pally talked about her hormones, her female hormones. But I just really loved everything that she was doing in this episode.
Oh yeah.
And they fit all of that into like a 30-minute time period. Like all of this stuff that we're talking about happened in one episode. So kudos to them for
Yeah.
compressing all of that.
I wanted to ask you because I think other seasons have made it more clear. What do you think the overarching storyline of this season is? Because you know how, like, in the prior seasons, the pack led threat was a much
Mhm.
bigger deal. Like, it
Right.
kind of like you can feel it throughout the episodes, even if it's not present in every one. Like, it was leading to an end encounter or something that was going to
Mhm.
be related to that. Whereas this season, it feels a lot more about the interpersonal relationships and their own individual struggles. Obviously, we're going to see
Yeah.
more come to a head of Bold Boimler. We're going to see more about this relationship for Mariner. We're going to get to see more about Tendi and maybe her backstory, or focus more on like her becoming a science officer. Rutherford has dealt with his demons and come out on top. So, like, what does he do now? But I don't feel like the show has that overarching, like, the series arc. Like, I don't it doesn't feel like there's some like threat, or and maybe it
Right.
doesn't have to be. Like, I
Mhm.
think we're just used to Star Trek having some overall threat that they have to deal with,
Yeah.
even if they have episode content that's purely episodic and doesn't serialize. Um, but even in slower decks, you can still see there's some serialized arc. So I'm really like, I don't really know what it is, but I'm curious. I wanted to get your thoughts if you've considered, like, what do you think is what's the ultimate point of this season? Like, what are we building towards?
In my mind, there's one of two options. Either number one, there isn't one, and we're just going to continue to have that character development, and there will at the end of the season we won't look back and say, "Oh yeah, that was the arc for this season." But the second one I'm thinking is it starts now. From this point after this episode, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's the arc. Whatever we see in the next week's episode, that's going to be what we see throughout. But I could be wrong also. So I think those it's one of those two, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's fair. I think that's a good point. Maybe it was getting them to this point, and now that they're at this point, they've all faced and accepted certain aspects of themselves. Like, Boimler was really easily jumping into the bold thing this episode. And
Yes.
Tendi was embracing her backstory, her past, her lineage. Mariner's learning how to be in a relationship, and Rutherford's already done with his stuff. So you're right;
Mhm.
they're new people at this point. So the rest of the season, who knows? That's cool.
Yeah. And we could continue on talking about this episode, I think, for another 30 minutes, but we want to actually get into our favorite segment. Every week we talk on boldly dadding. So I think this week's episode was a fantastic Deep Space Nine, but we always want to share some story or some lesson that we've learned during the past week as we are dads to two young children, or I should say, to three young children, because Shoff has two and I have one. And Shoff, what was your boldly dadding moment of this week?
So I have a couple. I'm trying to get to them through them quickly because I do have a couple. But the first thing is just the message I want to give out to other dads and even moms out there. Star Trek moms just as important as Star Trek dads. But you got to find time for you. This past week has been a bit of a challenge for me and for my wife. Our kids have been really high maintenance, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just a matter of fact thing. Like this past week, they've both been very emotional, very needy, very clingy. And I mean, they're 2 and 5 months old. So I mean, yes, that's normal. I'm not, so stupid that I don't know that. But it's really important that you can fill your own cup at the end of the day with the things that you need to do for you, the things that bring you joy, because you need to be able to have that moment to reset so that you're ready for the next day and whatever comes at you. So finding time for you is really important. So whatever that means, for me, it means eating the occasional edible and building some Lego sets. It means reading comic books before bed. It means watching more of my favorite shows. It means spending time with my wife. It means playing board games with her. It means, just getting a chance to decompress. So whatever that means for you, you got to find time at the end of the day for it, because that's just another way to ensure that you're your best for your kids.
And that, I think, is also part of our larger segment from last week, where we talked about the things that, or it might have been 2 weeks ago, Shuff, taking care of yourself, putting your oxygen mask on first before securing your child's. So yeah, I'm glad that is a lesson that we can give to our listeners or to our viewers. Definitely, I 100% agree with that. And in my own life, that's something that I'm trying to be as organized as possible, making sure I have time for the things that are my responsibilities and also things that I enjoy. So those two things juggling, I would not be where I'm at without the help of Google Calendar. That is 100% my go-to tool as far as scheduling, but just being on time and then being present for those moments when I'm with my son as well. And you had another one, Sean?
Oh yeah, just a couple of quick things. Yeah. So last night, while I was cooking dinner, I was making some delicious gourmet mac and cheese. The only way to make it, by the way, which is you take the box. And I think about this. Anybody who's just making mac and cheese by taking the box and that's it, no, don't ever do that again. What you got to do is you got to fry up some tofu. You got to steam some veggies, mixed veggies. You got to take some Lowry's seasoned salt, garlic powder, thyme, salt, pepper, and panko breadcrumbs.
Ooh.
And you mix all that together in the midst, in addition to your mac and cheese. And that's how you get delicious mac and cheese. But anyways,
nice.
I was making mac and cheese. My daughter, Emily, who's 2, she's the one who has been really high maintenance and needs, lots of attention. And when you're cooking, you don't really have the opportunity to give the attention to your child that you need to. So you have to kind of give them something to entertain themselves while you're doing that. So I gave her, she has this Montessori sink, and it lets her feel like she's washing dishes, and it gives that sense of being a helper. And so she has her own little tiny dishes, and there's no soap or anything, but it's like the thing is totally automated. It doesn't require water to be flowing into it because it's like a recycling system. So you put a little bit of water in, it goes through the faucet, and then it goes into the drain, and it goes back into the faucet. So it's just it lets her continue the water flow without wasting water, which is awesome. So it's really cool. But we got that for her, and so she likes to play with that while we're cooking. But she has been trying to wash other things. So she had her snacks next to her, and she grabbed her snacks, which were little cashews and almonds, and she started washing them underneath the sink. And she was washing them, and then she put them in her mouth, and she would look at me and she goes, "Yummy, yummy, yummy, yummy nucks," as she calls them instead of nuts. Yummy nucks. And so I said out loud to her, I was like, "Emily, don't wash your nuts." And then I thought to myself, I was like, I cannot believe. I was like, things I never thought I'd have to say to my daughter. Emily, stop washing your nuts. So that happened, and I thought that was really funny. I said to myself, I'm like, I got to mention this in the podcast. That is a phrase that is the weirdest phrase to say out loud. And then this morning we went to Starbucks, and she really was excited because she gets egg bites. Whenever we go to Starbucks drive
Ooh,
through, she
yes.
gets kale mushroom egg bites, and she loves them.
Nice.
But it was going to be like they were hot, and so she had to wait for them to cool. And while we were driving back to the house with them, I was telling her, I was like, "You need to be patient. You need to be patient." And I had gotten her this book. It's a Spider-Man book, and it's got Black Panther in it, and it's the book's message is about waiting patiently. And Doc Ock is the villain. It's one of those like Spidey and Friends, like the
Oh yeah.
cartoon series that's on
Hmm.
Disney Plus.
Yes.
And so the message of the book is you have to be patient because that there's benefit to that. Anyways, so she knows that if I say wait, you have to wait patiently, she immediately associates it with that book. And so her response to me was, and I quote, "Dada, all night long, Doc Ock book me read." Which basically means that she likes when I read that book to her at night. So she's just so cute, and she's stringing so many words together and just talking a ton. So I'm just very proud of her, and it's amazing how much she comprehends. And so the message with that is never underestimate how much your kids are absorbing and picking up on, because she made that association on her own and learned the lesson of patience from a book about Spider-Man and Black Panther. So, uh, the importance of reading, the importance of being intentional with what you say, because they are listening and they
Hmm.
are absorbing and they will pick it up, and that those associations stick. So just make them count is what I would have to say about that.
And I actually had a moment of that specific, not knowing that my son was paying attention to something and sinking it in. And I sent this to Shaw. I was watching Rick and Morty, an episode of Rick and Morty, where Rick and Morty had both been doing 1,000 crunches or a million crunches. So they wanted to show off their washboard abs. So they were walking around with what looked like crop top shirts and their abs exposed. And I look over at my son and he's got his shirt up where he had pulled his shirt up to expose his abs. And I was like, what is he doing? I didn't even put two and two together. And then I realized because the scene had gone off on
He's
Rick and
like
Morty, like
slapping him. He's like, yeah.
yeah, he was slapping his abs, which Morty had been doing earlier in the episode, but I didn't even think about it. But he had picked up on that, and it just amazed me. He's done the same thing with my podcasting microphone, where I will bring him close to the microphone, and he'll just start talking like ba 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 ba. So he's already trying to podcast, and I hadn't shown him, so I can't even remember where he had seen me doing it, but he has picked up on a lot of stuff. So, like you said, you never know what they're going to take in or what they're going to be exposed to. So definitely make sure you're not exposing them to the wrong things.
It's true.
But I 100% learned that lesson this week. And another lesson that I learned specifically this week when I was looking at, I have a digital photo slideshow that runs on my Google Home,
Oh,
and it
nice.
shows you, oh, this would happen a year ago, or this would happen a couple months ago. And so it'll show a side by side of my son, which is most of my pictures. And just in a couple months' time, the changes in him. Now we experience it, as it's going day by day. The
Right.
changes are so slow, we're not noticing it. But you look back, a year has gone by, 2 years have gone by, and you don't realize, oh, he's not going to be the same way forever. Now we have that in the back of our minds, of course. Oh, I know he's going to grow up and become a man one day, or a woman. But when we're experiencing it day to day, that's not something that we're thinking about. So that has caused me to say, these moments that are happening, you're not going to be able to get them back.
True.
And you should really cherish the time that you have. And I try to do that in all aspects of my life, with all family members, with my mom, my dad, my wife, my son. You're just not, you the only constant in life is change. So you can never get too used to something being the same way. Oh, it's always going to be this way. No, you're not going to always live in this place. You're not going to always experience the same things over and over again. So I've learned to cherish those times and those moments that I have with my son, because he's not going to be the same person when he's 1 year old as when he's 5 years old, as when he's 10 years old. And he, sooner or later, he's not going to want to spend time with me. So yeah, just that's been my moment this week to just kind of take in that my son is of the age right now where he enjoys my company and he wants to be around me. So just kind of take those moments as they come and
Yeah.
hold on to them as best I can.
You've got a young podcast co-host in the making. That would be so much fun if you did a podcast down the road when he's talking, and he doesn't have to be like articulate, but just like he's able to like share what's on his mind as a kid. I mean, you're only a couple years away from that, and that would be super fun as a dad to have a podcast like that. So that'd be really
Yeah.
cool.
Excellent. Well, Shoff, I have had so much fun on this episode. I hope you have as well, and I hope our listeners and our viewers have as well. Want to let everybody know that you can always follow us on social media: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are TREKnopod. Also, if you would do us a favor, give us a subscribe on TikTok, or I guess follow on TikTok, and then subscribe on YouTube. Hit that notification bell every time we put out a new segment or a new short. We're trying as best we can to put out some great content for you. So we would appreciate it. And so far, the love has been great on all of those platforms. But in particular, the Trek community has come out on TikTok and YouTube. I think those are the best platforms that we've found for interacting and engaging with the community. So 100%. We very much appreciate everything that you guys have reached out to us. Let us know that you're enjoying our content, and we love all of the feedback that we get and the voicemail that we got this week. You can always leave us a voicemail on Anchor. That's one of the great things about the platform is they let us have some type of interaction with our community. So just want to 100% push that and let everybody know that you can always leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcast or on Spotify. We greatly appreciate that, and that also helps us kind of get known and other people to see us in the podcasting community. So 100% that helps us out. Schaff and I put out a special captain's co-captain's commentary for the first Star Trek film, Star Trek The Motion Picture, the 4K Director's Edition. And by the time you listen to this episode, it will most likely be out. We're putting this out on the 1st of October.
Yep.
So definitely, we had a lot of fun doing our commentary on that one. We're going to continue that series on every film in the Star Trek canon. So continue to check us out there. We're going to continue to do those co-captains commentaries, have a lot of fun there. And next week, we're going to continue our ongoing discussion of Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Shaw. I can't wait to see what happens next on Star Trek Lower Decks.
Woo!
All right. I think that's going to conclude it, Shaw. Thank you very much for everyone's support. Schaff and Vector here, two to beam up.
Live long and prosper! Yeah. Ooh.